Okay, so we are at 9:50. Welcome, everybody. I'm Karma Loveday. I'm the editor of the Water Report, and I will be your chair for the next hour or so at this event. So the theme of this session is driving innovation, and I think we can probably all agree that that is something that's going to be essential in supporting the industry to rise to increasingly strident leakage targets. Now, many of you may have been at the October webinar that Judith and the team put on, and you may remember the innovation session then. Now, we heard, if I recall correctly, about quite a wide range of innovations, from satellite technology and smart networks to drones, data, and dogs of the sniffer variety. And I also recall there was quite a sense of confidence among participants that the water sector's ambitions on leakage for 2025, 2030 and 2050 are achievable. I think buoyed up by the 7% reduction that was achieved in AMP6. But also there was a sense of caution that we are at the beginning of this journey and a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already gone. So today, essentially, our speakers are going to pick up where we left off in October and give us some updates on key issues in this area. So we're going to hear, first of all, about Ofwat's Innovation Fund. Then we'll hear about the sector's innovation strategy. And finally, we'll hear more about the leakage innovation heat map and the leakage route map. So the structure for the session is very simple. We've got 3 15-minute segments, and then we've got 20 minutes at the end for questions and discussion. If there's time within the 15 minutes each speaker has to take 1 or 2 questions, I'll try and squeeze those in as we go through. So please do put your questions in the chat. Just to be clear, you need to be in the chat that's within the session button on the right-hand side of your screen, rather than the chat that's in the event button. So please, if you're not in the session section, please do click on that and make sure you put your questions in there. And we'll get through as many as we can. So with that, I will pass across to our first speaker, or I should actually say speakers, because our first presentation is a double header. We're going to hear about the Ofwat Innovation Fund. Obviously, that's launched since we last met as a community. And we'll hear from Harry Armstrong, who's Director of Regulatory Policy at Ofwat, and also Ben Tam, who's Managing Director of Isle Utilities, who've been working with Ofwat on the fund. So over to you, Harry and Ben.
Thanks a lot, Karma. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see our slides. It should work. There we go. Right, great. Okay, so as Karma said, we're going to be talking a bit about Ofwat's Innovation Fund, something we're really excited about. And hopefully you guys have already heard a lot about this already, either through some of the events we've been running, which Ben will talk a bit more about later, or through some of the other publications and outputs that we've been putting out over the last couple of years about this. So how we're going to do this, I'm going to give you a little bit of background as to why we're running the fund, what the purpose is, what we want to see happen as a result of this, and why we're doing this as an innovation competition. Then Ben's going to talk us through in a bit more detail the first competition that we've launched, as Karma said, launched on the 18th of January, and Ben's going to talk us through what that covers, what it focuses, how to get involved, how to enter, etc. And then I'm going to finish up with just a bit more of a forward look as to what can be expected over the next year and through the next 5 years, how we're going to be running this innovation competition and how we want to keep connected and keep you involved in how that progresses. So as a reminder then, we are running this innovation competition over the whole of this 5-year AMP period. And so we've collected an additional 200 million to invest in innovation, specifically through the innovation competition. And we've designed this in a way that we're going to be running several different types of competitions. So smaller competitions, the likes of which we've just launched in the Innovation in Water Challenge. So these will be smaller amounts of funding. Ben will go into a bit more detail about what that looks like in practice. And we will be running what we're calling, imaginatively calling, the main competition, which will be the much bigger competition. At the moment, there's about £40 million that's earmarked for that. So different sizes of competitions. And the idea is that this will pick up different types of innovation and give different opportunities, not just to water companies, but also to different types of third parties, smaller and bigger third parties. The idea of the whole competition is that it's going to support Ofwat's other innovation activities, whether those are stretching long-term targets or through generally operating in an outcomes-based way and allowing companies to innovate, etc., and create efficiencies. This is a defined pot of money for innovative activities, and what we're saying here is really this is going beyond business as usual activities, so opportunities for companies and others to try something new and do something in a different way. And the purpose is to help build the sector's capacity to innovate, as well as delivering innovation that's going to better enable the whole sector to meet some of those big stretching long-term targets, to benefit customers, benefit society, and benefit the environment. Now, when we've been looking at innovation within the sector, while innovation is happening, arguably the UK's water sector has fallen behind in recent years compared to others. And we feel like there are a number of innovation enablers that the sector needs to start employing or start making better use of. So being more open, being more collaborative with each other. There is a dearth of collaboration between companies when it comes to innovation, and that could lead to benefits again for customers, society, and the environment. So we're looking for more collaboration, not just between water companies, but with others in the sector as well. Taking that long-term view when we're thinking about these long-term challenges. So not just thinking about short-term innovation, but innovation that could deliver benefits through the long term. Being more open to innovative risk, managing innovation risk. We realize there are other factors and incentives within our regulatory framework that have an effect on this, but we're hoping that through the innovation competition we can signal an interest that Ofwat has in companies trying new and different things and third parties trying new and different things and taking a bit more risk there. And lastly, scalability and deployability. See, the sector does a lot of pilots and kind of early scale testing, but what it doesn't do particularly well is scaling and rolling these out across the sector, and we want to see a lot more of this. So these are some of the attributes, some of the innovation enablers that we want to see start to happen and come through the innovation competition. Now, we've set out 5 strategic themes that the innovation competitions are going to focus on, and these line up very neatly with those that have been outlined in the sector strategy, which we'll hear more about in a bit. And I'll go through these very quickly. They're not, any of them aren't a surprise, or I hope not a surprise. So adapting and responding to climate change, particularly things like meeting the sector's very ambitious net zero emissions targets. Operational resilience and infrastructure. Again, this is going to have a particular impact on the leakage sector and improving resilience when it comes to leakage, but also in terms of the climate change, making sure we're doing that in a way that isn't increasing emissions or having other detrimental impacts. Thirdly, delivering wider public value through any of these operations. So this is trying to look for other ways in which value can be created through the innovations or processes that companies are already delivering. Restoring the ecological status of our water environments, reducing the impacts of weather and pollution. And lastly, opening up the opportunity for open data, which we think is a real catalyst for stimulating further innovation and collaboration. And again, I think there's an important link here to the leakage sector and opportunities there for both collaboration, but also learning and adaptation and prediction, potentially through the uses of data. So I'm going to hand over to Ben now, who's going to talk us through in a bit more specific detail how the first competition, the Innovation in Water Challenge, is going to work. So over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, morning, everyone. So yeah, hopefully in the next few minutes, I'll be able to bring everybody up to speed about how we progress with IWC and make sure that everyone's really aware of how the competition is structured and running. And of course, we're on hand either during today and outside of here to listen to people's feedback and also take other questions. We're lucky we've got running with this. We're up and running. It started on the 18th of January, and we know there's been a great deal of activity around getting entries together. As Harry mentioned, this is the first opportunity, the first of the two funds. It's the smaller size, and there's an opportunity to win up to £250,000 for your innovative projects. It goes beyond business as usual innovation. So this is things which have not been funded so far. This is things which were perhaps even outside of business plans originally. And it's also there to improve this collaboration across the sector so that society, the environment and customers will benefit from the innovation going on. But it helps water companies, it's really going to help when water companies join up on entries up from the beginning, but also through supply chain and building partnerships from outside of the sector as well. Some of the work that IL's been brought in to help power is getting this message out globally. And so we're looking for partners who are based anywhere in the world. So supply chain partners, innovators, solutions can come from anywhere, from within and without, outside the sector. Let's go to the next one. The entry period closes pretty soon, and I'll probably reiterate this point. This is the first round, and it's been condensed. It's been a hive of activity, and there are other opportunities coming up. But we've gone until the 26th of February to get entries in. We've assigned a judging panel now. There are 7 judges, which will be announced very soon. I think probably during this week or early into next. So people will have a real feel about who is going to be judging these overall as well. And winners will be informed and money dispersed and out there by April, which means this fund has come up and got going within 4 months. We've had this raft of these first projects going, and also then Harry will touch on the end how this then will go on. We'll go on to the main competition and the subsequent round of this Innovation and Water Challenge, which will be in the autumn time. Let's go to the next one. It's going to be between £50,000 and £250,000. I'll just sort of touch on why. It was to try with this first fund to get some of the smaller ideas up and running really quickly. So this is also, we're learning through this process, but also it runs alongside a bigger competition where up to £40 million is enabled in one round. So it is to get to mobilise things quickly. We think there'll be about 10 to 15 prize awards, but we'll see about what comes in through the entries. And there's going to be this 10% match funding, which I've got to touch on again a bit later on. And that comes either through the water company or through partnership arrangements. And the lead is a water company. So they'll be the person who kind of marshal this through the entry. This was to try and visualize it for people, as we were always asked at the beginning how the prize fund is going to work. We think it'll be a bit like this. Again, don't be, it's not about putting entries into the penny or to the pound. It's just roughly that would mean that we have a spread, we think, of different types of projects coming through. Things which don't make it through in the first round, obviously there will be no barrier to them entering subsequent rounds. There'll be some sorts of feedback in there. It is a competition. And hopefully through going through this process, some of the good ideas either come out through here and go through the fund, or potentially just get funded through other routes as well. So we're hoping. Next slide. I think we sort of touched on our assessment criteria, and we've got some FAQs up on the website, having listened closely to everybody, but also around today. We're looking for this positive impact on consumer, society and the environment. That links in really well with the Ofwat themes, but also going forward into what the water companies themselves have put together in a 2050 strategy across, and also then what Jeremy's going to be talking about later in terms of the innovation heat map. We're going to be trying to judge on, is it an innovative solution? Is it going to move the sector forward? What makes this different? And lastly, the third point is just that capacity to deliver. And this also goes to the risk point. Capability and capacity to deliver doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a completely successful outcome. It may not mean that innovation sticks and scales, but it does mean that we've moved ourselves forward. We've learned by going through that process. This innovation fund is here to help us de-risk some of those bigger steps that we're going to want to take. I think it's recognised that will mean that some of these things don't necessarily mean that it completely scales up. But I think that is okay in terms of the sector. We need to make sure we are taking some of these risks to take ourselves forward. There are 17 water companies in England and Wales, which can be the lead applicants, or about 9 new entrants out there as well. So we're seeing there'll be one as a lead applicant, but we're really urging to sort of joining up in terms of the water companies, in terms of that application, and partners can be one or multiple. We imagine for the IWC, it's going to be, you know, maybe one or two, potentially then for the main competition, there's going to be much bigger consortiums pulled together because the ideas, the solutions being brought forward are going to be much more far-reaching. Hopefully applications, well, we know lots of applications are out there and they're all coming in. So this first one closes on the 26th. We know not everybody's going to get everything in through this round, and I just urge that there is a subsequent round, there is the main competition coming up. The next one. So the requirements for these successful entries, I'm not going to go through in full detail across here, but I'm going to pick on a few. The financial contribution, we've got lots of information on the FAQs, but that is broadly this 10% financial contribution. If there is a different arrangement proposed, I think we are able to listen, but we've tried to answer that as clear as we can. I think it's really important to focus on monitoring and reporting requirements in terms of how are you going to make sure that this either trial or scale up, how are you going to measure whether it's successful or unsuccessful, or it's worked or it hasn't worked. We've had a huge amount of IPR, and we could probably spend most of this sort of going through the sort of how this has been set out. We've tried to make it just clear in terms of a boundary between foreground and background IPR. That was to get things moving quickly. The IWC is about learning and listening as well. There is an opportunity through the application form to suggest different IPR rights, and through our surgery sessions that we'll be running on Thursday afternoons. And also if you come directly, we will be able to give at least our steer on how we believe this might work. But it was there to try and make this as frictionless as possible to get things moving, not thinking that it's be the be all and end all of it. But going back to that original aim, this is for the benefit of customers, society, the environment, especially it's focused on the UK water sector. So bearing in mind that and the way this money is being dispersed, trying to marry those two ideas together will be what's very important. I'll just go to the last slide. I think on my slide, we've run brokerage sessions. We've had about 30 technologies present now, two live sessions, one pre-recorded session. I think about 20% when I look through around leakage technologies, which I think is, you know, testament to the fact that we've got a lot of activity there in this area. I'm really excited that we're starting off ahead of Andrea and then Jeremy, because I think this all marries together really well. This fund, and one of the things which I've seen across the sector, I'm sure others will echo, is that we go to mini design sprints, we go to hackathons, we put ideas down on paper, but converting those from sticky notes into something which happens across our sector is really difficult. And this allows us to have one funding route, one toolkit which might do that. And I know that, you know, the work the water companies have done on the 2050 strategy has helped clarify some of that, and pinpointing again for leakage. Jeremy's got this the heat map side through Upware, which really enables us to sort of see where research is happening, where we should be maybe focusing. And I think that just helps us steer the competition towards something like IWC if it's the right place. And I'm really excited to see that we're going to get a portfolio of projects which will include leakage. There we go. Back to you, Harry.
Great, thanks, Ben. So just to reiterate a few things. We want the sector, the whole sector, to see this innovation competition as an opportunity and to make the most of that opportunity. At the same time, we've based this and built on competitions in other sectors, so that those that Ofgem run in the energy sector and other competitions elsewhere. We are not going to get this right, as Ben said, first time. And some of the policies and approaches we've taken partly because we want to, we need to ensure that every bit of money that's spent on this is able to benefit all customers across England and Wales. And so that's where some of the requirements around IP come from, and particularly as Ben was mentioning, things around monitoring, reporting, building evidence, sharing knowledge across the sector is going to be really critical for us. But the IWC is not going to be the template from which we build everything. We're going to adapt each time as we learn what works and what doesn't work to achieve our aims, our impacts, which we've set out. We're going to shift elements of the competition to make sure either that we serve the bits of the sector that we need to serve, or we focus on the areas that really need innovation more than others. And so we've kept things fairly broad for the IWC. We have the main competition coming up, which is going to build on where the IWC is starting from, with potentially some changes to some of those policies, and we'll have more information coming out about that in due course. And then for later competitions, we're also looking at potentially some bigger policy changes around where eligibility is, so application from third parties. We can't guarantee we can do this, but we do want to explore it. And again, just to repeat what Ben was saying earlier, this is not a one-shot deal. We have 2 competitions, both 2 IWC and 2 main competitions within the next financial year. We are looking also to run further competitions after that across the whole 5-year period. So there will be lots of opportunities to build partnerships and submit applications into future rounds as well. So even if you aren't successful here, this is a beginning of a process. This isn't a one-shot deal. If you've got any questions or you want to stay up to date, do click on the waterinnovation.challenges.org website and go and sign up to the newsletter. There is also an email address that you can go and ask questions to directly. So we look forward to seeing your applications or getting in touch soon. Thanks a lot, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. It is great to see that competition actually getting off the ground. I'm sure we can all agree on that. So in the interest of time, we will move on to our next speaker. But just to remind everyone, we will have a 20-minute Q&A at the end. So please do start posting your questions for the speakers in the chat, and we will get to those. But I will now introduce our second speaker, and that's Andrea Gysin. She's Head of Research, Development and Innovation at Thames Water. She spoke to us in October, so please welcome her back, and she's going to be updating us on the sector's innovation strategy and the Centre of Excellence. So over to you, Andrea.
Fantastic, thanks Karma, and good morning everybody. So for those of you who joined the October webinar, some of the slides and the information within them will look familiar. So I'm going to whiz through them fairly quickly with the goal of giving you the new information and also maximising our time for Q&A at the end. So just as a quick reminder, let me see, get my slides to move on. So very much echoing what Harry said earlier in terms of the opportunities we see for innovation within the sector. So lots of good stuff going on, but there's really an opportunity to make that more transparent through the entire innovation life cycle, and making sure that we're not just looking at point solutions, but really facilitating an innovation culture through that culture of openness, and that flows from open data to better partnerships, deeper partnerships, and making sure that we're very clear as water companies on what our needs are. So that everybody out there in the supply chain, new entrants, innovators can respond to those, and we can work together to develop solutions. So the strategy is a sector innovation strategy. So it's developed by the water industry, the 20 water companies across the UK and Ireland, including Northern Ireland, for the innovation for the water sector. Get my words muddled up. So very much intended to be all-encompassing, and so through the development of the strategy, we engaged heavily with the supply chain, and hopefully that's the end product that we put out there really reflects the views not just of the water companies, but of the sector at large. So the vision we set out was to create open collaboration opportunities across the water sector, drive transformational change through innovation that delivers greater value for customers and the environment. We set out a series of principles, again, very much consistent with what I mentioned earlier. So opening that collaborative opportunity, leveraging data, also leveraging new ways of working, making space for innovation culture. So that's really recognizing that culture isn't something that just happens. We have to actually acknowledge the enablers to allow us as a sector and the organizations within it to adapt to that innovation culture. And then finally, and very importantly, being led by environmental, social and economic purpose. So everything we do under the banner of innovation for the sector needs to have outcomes in at least one of those 3 domains. We set out a series of themes. So the 7 themes we identified, very high level, and touch on many aspects of the sector. The one that, of course, is very relevant here is taking a whole life approach to responsible consumption and production, which is where leakage is captured. We quite deliberately developed that theme, recognising the breadth of areas that impact water use. Leakage is obviously a major factor in terms of the efficiency with which we use that precious resource. But essentially, we need to consider water resource very much from reservoir to tap, and then all the way through the other end of the cycle. So that theme is broad and includes aspects such as water reuse as well. And it's worth saying, when we developed the theme, we didn't start from scratch. So we recognised in the development of all of these themes that we already had a brilliant stage set by way of the UCWIR big questions. So the leakage theme was very much derived from all of the good work that had already been done to develop the UCWIR big question on driving towards zero leakage, and Jeremy will touch on that more in a short while. So our ambition for 2050 is that we will have sustainably achieved zero leakage. And within the strategy, we set out those aims. We tried to articulate that in horizons. So if we want to achieve zero leakage by 2050, where do we want to be in the medium term? So by 2035, we're looking to have tripled the rate of leakage reduction. We're looking to make sure that the new pipework we lay is leak-free. Leaks are found quickly after they break out. New leaks on existing pipes are minimised. And you can see there, I won't read out all those short-term aims, but many of those will look very familiar because they're the things we're working on today in order to build on that fantastic 16% reduction we achieved in the previous AMP. So the new element to this is what we've started to do as water companies is try and drill down to some more granular challenges. We recognise that certainly everyone in this forum is more than aware of the things that it takes in order to sustainably reduce leakage. But for the supply chain, and in particular for new entrants, sometimes it's difficult to drill down to what exactly do we need to achieve in order to reduce our leakage. So we set out to drill down to some more specific challenge areas. And you can see the top 5 specific challenges that we identified in terms of leakage identified here on the screen. And so again, very much consistent with what I mentioned on the previous slide, but just getting down to the specifics of being able to rapidly identify leaks, and especially identifying that low level of background leakage, which is so challenging in terms of getting on top of. How do we change the way we operate and maintain our assets in order to minimise new leaks? So that can be anything from calm networks and pressure management to other changes we make and the way we make interventions that can lead to new leaks erupting. Again, that all important, the new pipes we put into the ground need to be leak-free once they're laid. And lots of valuable work going on in that space in terms of standards for workmanship, for design, for technology. How might we accurately measure water? Now, water metering, of course, is all important in this area, but many companies, Thames included, is a long way from having universal metering. So in the absence of that, how can we make sure that we really understand the amount of water that is leaking from our network so we can target that in the most efficient way and make sure we can drive the number down to zero? And then finally, repairs. How do we make them quickly, economically, and with minimal disruption? Obviously, that's a huge societal impact as well as customer impact. So that's right up there in terms of getting our cost to serve down. So those challenge statements are published as part of a document on the Water Innovation 2050 website. Feel free to go and take a look. We've driven down to specific challenges in all of the theme areas. So for those of you who are interested beyond leakage, do look up that document, and again, you'll be able to see these leakage challenges in there as well. So next I wanted to touch on how. So the strategy is a great document for setting out intent and setting out some guiding directions about what we're looking for as an industry and as a sector. But in terms of how we hope to achieve that, the Centre of Excellence is really the key central delivery model that we're looking to build. So that centre of excellence is about making sure that we create a place for innovation to be captured. So for the development of skills and resources, for sharing of the sort of challenge statements that I've highlighted there, but also of all the valuable information that comes out of innovation projects that we're developing as a sector. So essentially, it's creating that central focal point for innovation. We identified a series of functions. Again, these were workshopped quite extensively with stakeholders from across the sector to identify what is it that a centre of excellence needs to deliver, not just for the water companies, but for the sector as a whole. And you can see there's a series of functions here with a bit of a description. This isn't new. This was published in the sector innovation strategy back in September. But you can see there are 4 key areas at the top: a proposals portal, that opportunity to challenge, to publish opportunities and needs statements, the action of an integrator, and the facilitation of collaboration groups, which our stakeholders felt were really important in terms of facilitating innovation. So we're now working on making that a reality. So we're in the process of setting up a legal entity and putting in place the appropriate governance around the Centre of Excellence. So that will initially be set up under the auspices of Water UK as the collaborative body between the water companies. But again, recognising that it has to serve the sector as a whole. So we're looking to form a board that is not just representative of water companies, but includes participation from the supply chain as well. Then we'll be looking to secure startup funding. So we have provided significant seed funding from the water companies to get this moving, but we will be bringing forward a bid to the Innovation in Water Challenge as well to boost that seed funding and accelerate the development of the Centre of Excellence. And then, of course, recruiting a team. So actively working on getting those job specifications out there so that we can start to put the team in place that will make this happen. And the goal is that we'll have a minimum viable product of the Centre of Excellence in play by the summer of this year. So looking to move really rapidly on that. So that's all from me. As it says on the slide there, you can visit us on LinkedIn. That's the best way of finding updates on the strategy, on the developments of the Centre of Excellence, or via the Water Innovation 2050 website. So please do take a look at that. Many thanks.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Andrea. And you've helpfully left a couple of minutes for me to sneak in a question. I haven't got any in the chat, I don't think, specifically for you. So I will just ask you a quick one myself, which it may be a silly question, but I think for this community, it might be of interest. I was just thinking about the Centre of Excellence there. And obviously, I can see that you're in the early stages of getting that up and running. But are we likely to see anything like a kind of leakage department within the Centre of Excellence, or will leakage just be kind of integrated across a number of other areas?
So it's a really good question, Karma, and the intent isn't that we're going to build a and I should have made this clearer actually, we're not looking to build a new Centre of Excellence which has bricks and mortar premises and a large team. And the reason for that is because we believe really strongly that most of the expertise that we need is out there. It's just not connected very well. So in terms of bringing together sector-specific leakage expertise, yes, we would expect the Centre of Excellence to do that, but we'd expect it to do it by leveraging existing networks that already exist, existing fora that already exist. So this conference is a great example of something that goes far beyond the event that may happen once a year, because it's created a community, an enduring community that's lasted many years. So what we would be looking to do with the Centre of Excellence is finding a way of making that community active and dynamic and interacting throughout the year. And that essentially would become the leakage department, so to speak. So yeah, as I said, trying to avoid replication, because I don't think that's what we need as a sector. We already have so many active participants to innovation, but it's about coordinating them and making them visible so that if you're a new entrant, you know where to go if you want to talk about leakage.
Brilliant, thank you. And great to see that increased detail, I think, from October around those challenge statements. So yes, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so we will now move on to our final speaker, and that's Jeremy Heath. I'm sure many of you know Jeremy. He's the Innovation Manager at SES Water. He's going to be giving us an update on the innovation heat map and the leakage route map. And just a reminder that after Jeremy, we do go straight into the panel. So if you have any questions for Ben or Harry or Andrea or Jeremy, or just general innovation leakage debate type questions that you'd like to have aired today, please do start popping your questions in the chat and we will pick those up after Jeremy. So over to you. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can somebody just, obviously I can't see the rest of the chat now because I'm sharing. Can somebody just confirm to me that you can see my slides there?
I can see them, Jeremy, thank you.
That's fantastic. So good morning, welcome. You know, every conference we go to, they will wheel out someone from our regulator, from Ofwat, and hopefully a CEO or two to say how important things are. But you know what, with leakage, it really is important. We are going through some of the most, I'm going to say, exciting and interesting times we ever have done. And those of you who are leakage managers out there are going, yes, you have no idea how exciting and interesting it is for us at this current time. But we've never seen changes like we are seeing at the moment. 15% reduction plus is a huge driver in our industry. 3 or 4 years ago, I was asked to come along and speak at this conference about innovation. And I remember thinking at the time, you know, yeah, the leakage industry really needs innovation coming into it. And I gave a talk that effectively said, don't expect a silver bullet. Yeah, don't expect the cavalry to come riding over the hill with the answer because leakage is complicated. What I found really exciting is seeing what's been happening with innovation over the last few years. The stimulus that we've now got from our regulator, and you've been hearing about that this morning, is really, really important. This innovation that's now coming through. And I'm really excited because I've been meeting with Andrea and the other innovation managers, and we can see all the stuff that's coming through, all the projects that companies are now starting to put in. Okay, so do be encouraged that there is a real move towards leakage innovation in the UK at the moment. And I'm seeing some really encouraging stuff coming through and projects being talked about. So what I'm going to do this morning is just take you through the latest kind of stuff we've got. I'm going to talk about the heat map again. I'm really sorry. I know there's at least 2 people listening in today who haven't heard about it. So I will go through that very briefly just to explain the kind of setup. And then I'm going to talk about the route map and where it's taking our research at the moment. And then finally, a little bit about some of the other areas that we're starting to look at as well. So let's work our way through. This is the leakage innovation heat map. So effectively, this is a project that I did, which is going around to all of the water companies and saying, share your innovation. Tell me what you're working on. And that was over 320 projects scattered throughout 17 water companies across the UK. The first number that you see in each column there is the number of projects in each area. And the second number is a score that I gave to each project, and that's the cumulative score. Effectively, it's based upon the size of the project, how willing a company is to share their information and data, and the status of it. So a large project fully completed where the company says we'll share all of the data, got a top mark of 40. So it gives you an idea of the value of that project to the rest of the industry. Now, okay, what does that tell us? So it tells us that there's a lot of work going on in that bottom left area. All new leaks are found quickly. That's what we call the awareness and location part, okay? And a lot of work is going in that, looking at acoustic and non-acoustic methods, and also network leakage awareness. That's the kind of smart networks, the AI and machine learning techniques that are coming through at the moment. I will be honest, it's quite a congested area. Myself, like a lot of the other innovation managers, we receive regular contacts from companies going, look, we can bring in AI and machine learning techniques to help you with leakage. And the message I always say to them is, brilliant, great, let me see what you've got, but do be aware that's quite a congested area at the moment. Lots of companies working in that particular area. Top right there, we can confidently quantify leakage. You can see there's a real peak there about property allowances. I suspect a lot of that was due to the AMP period where companies were trying to make sure that they got their leakage quantified exactly. And so a lot of work was going into using smart meters and small area monitors in order to say, do we really understand what's going on inside the properties? I think that's probably going to die down a bit in that area going forward, though. So that leaves 2 particular areas which I'm really kind of interested in. So new leaks on existing networks are minimized. When we talk about leakage, sorry, PALM, you're going to hear it again, prevent, aware, locate, amend. And this is the prevent area, okay? How do we stop leaks from occurring in the first place? And you can see there's a number of projects going on in that area. pressure optimization, mains condition and network calming. For me, I think that's an extremely fruitful area, and it's really interesting looking at projects coming through for the Innovation in Water Challenge. I'm seeing quite a few projects in those kind of areas, looking at that kind of pressure calming and things like that, looking at what we can do in those kind of areas, stopping leaks occurring in the first place. Okay, and that's a bit of a wider remit, I think, for a lot of our kind of leak departments within our companies, because traditionally we focus very much on the find and fix bit of it, but we need to expand that vision out and go, okay, how do I stop it occurring in the first place? So we're seeing quite a bit of work going on in that area. But the other area I've been really pushing over the past year is this other area down here, is the mend side. And it became obvious when we talked to all of the companies that this was an area where there's not a lot of innovation taking place. Okay, most of it down into kind of repair process optimization. How can we use existing stuff quicker, better and faster? So I've been really pushing there and saying, right, how do we come up with better ways of doing that? And we're starting to see some fruit coming through from that with some really interesting projects, which I'm going to go through actually from Upweir's side as well, with some really interesting developments to try and speed up how we can mend pipes faster. Okay, so some really interesting work going on in there. Now at the bottom I put the link to the heat map. If anybody hasn't seen that, it's available to download for free. It's not just this bit here, you can actually see all the project listings from the companies as well. I'll share it in the chat as well after this one. I can't do it while I'm talking, it's too complicated to do that as well, but I will share that in the chat. So that was the piece of work we did last year. I was hoping to be able to present today and say, oh, and I've now got a big update on that. I put that out just before Christmas to the leakage managers and said, look, can you provide me with an update on what's going on? Some have been able to come back, but I recognize obviously at the moment it's a bit of a busy period for you guys. So I'm going to leave it for a month or so. Hopefully once the weather turns, things die down a little bit and we'll go through it then. There's not an urgency that we've got to get this done, because the work that we've done here has been so useful in getting people to work together and to start that kind of collaboration piece, and to also put some great projects in for the Innovation in Water Challenge. It's been a really useful piece of work for that. Okay, but it feeds into, and one of the original purposes was to say, okay, what do we do with our Upweir research? And so here we go. This is the current research program at the moment. I'm not going to talk individually about projects because I've actually summarized later on. But for those that haven't seen this, we badge everything at the top under that PALM acronym: prevent, aware, locate and mend. We have 6 outcomes we're trying to solve there, with key benefits underneath. And down below you can see the projects. Blue completed, green is live, red is planned, and the kind of orangey color is things that are still in the idea stage at the moment. But it's been really good. We've had some really good projects come through in the last year. I'll just quickly go through those. A number of really great live ones and some really good areas we're moving into. Again, the link for this particular map I'll be posting up on the chat in a minute. Just be aware you may not see this actual copy. I will make this available anyway, because I've only just sent that through to Upweir and said, could you update this one? So, whoops, let's go through those projects. So ones that we've just had that are finished, the blue ones here, impact of customer side leakage approaches. So saying what's the optimal way of picking up on your customer side leakage, and looking at the different ways that happens, the benefits of those. And best practice for trunk main flow monitoring areas, an extremely important bit of research that says, okay, how do we make sure we're measuring trunk main leakage correctly? What's the best way of doing that? And looks at all the different approaches and comes up with a really good way of saying, here's how we can look at trunk main leakage and get a really good understanding of it. Okay, so moving on, these are the projects that we've got in the pipeline at the moment, or some of them. These 3 are actually all PhD projects that we're looking at. Hydrant dynamics. Okay, if we're going to use fittings like a hydrant to put our acoustic devices on, how do we make sure we put them in exactly the right place on that hydrant? Doesn't make any difference if you put them in different places and what kind of signal. Combination of transient and steady state detection methods. Can we actually hear a pop when a main bursts? We typically listen for the sound of the water running, but can we actually hear a main bursting and use that as a way of actually locating it better? And then pipe wave modeling for acoustic leak detection, a bit of the kind of, you know, the golden egg here. Can we tell additional details from the sound that tell us what type of pipe it is, what type of leak it is, what size of leak it is, and things like that. So just trying to understand those areas. All PhD projects going on at the moment. We're cooperating with Australia. In fact, we've brought into a project they're doing, looking at pipe sensing down there. So we're seeing some results coming through from there, which seem really good. Australia are obviously having some great research on leakage at the moment. And then 3 that have literally just gone live. Improving the testing approach to novel lining materials. So this is looking at when we're putting a lining down a pipe, okay, how do we make sure that it's doing a really good job? Now, most of the testing that we're doing on that really relates to things like water quality, okay, and things like that. But actually what we want to know is the structural strength of it and the longevity and all of those kind of things. And there's a number of lining materials coming through at the moment, okay. We want to be adopting those because obviously that's part of our prevent or even our mend, okay. We test. And so this project is looking at and going, okay, how do we come up with a really good way of testing these lining materials and making sure that we're getting the best value for money out of them, okay? Transferring minimal excavation methods, exactly back onto that mender piece. And this is effectively looking outside our industry and just going, hang on, there's lots of really good methods of repairing underground assets out there. How can we take some of those and transfer them into our industry? What's the methods that we should be bringing over? What are the barriers to us being able to do that? So that's an ongoing project at the moment. And then we're looking at the causes of transients in distribution networks. We know that we kind of lost a lot of information when we just started sampling pressure rather than measuring it all the time. Now we've got far more data coming in. We're aware of the transients going through our network. So one of the pieces of work is saying what causes those. Now everybody thinks about pumps, but we get transients on gravity networks as well. So we need to understand where those are coming from. And then that kind of leads into the next stage of research. And these are projects that we're kind of planning at the moment, is to go, okay, once we know about those transients, what's the impact? Now you think about a transient going through and causing a burst, but it's not just that. Once you've got a transient in a network, effectively you're flexing that pipe. And if it's something that happens continually every day, every time that pump comes on or every time that ball valve slams shut, that's something that's going to be cyclic, okay? And a cyclic stress upon a pipe is slowly going to open up cracks and things like that. And so we want to look at that impact of the pressure transients and find out what's the long-term things, because we may find that even small transients on a regular basis are actually causing those fractures just to keep on growing, and that's leading to those bursts as well. And then that leads into another piece of work, the deterioration of cast iron pipes and the impact on leakage. Now you'd think we know that really well, but remember our assets are buried well below ground. So we want to do a really good piece of work on understanding how that kind of leak develops, okay? How the deterioration of the cast iron pipe affects the growth of that leak and everything else like that. So a lot of work going on there. So very quickly, just finish off with some additional discussions. And these are other areas that we're kind of looking at the moment. Obviously the innovation funds, and you've been hearing about those, yeah? So the innovation heat map is saying, how do we make best use of those funds? It's a lot about collaboration, and I'm pleased to say actually I came out of a meeting on Friday, meeting with some other leakage, some other innovation managers with some great discussions about leakage projects and how we can collaborate together. I would encourage all of you who are leakage managers listening to this to ensure that your company is looking at how you can collaborate with other companies in terms of developing this innovation. It's a huge opportunity for us at the moment, and it's a kind of beg from me, please, please, please let us make really, really good use of that funding. So do collaborate together on it. Pipe bots, and we're going to be hearing about that later, but this is the whole idea of robots in pipes. Every time I go along to one of these kind of workshops or things like that and they say, let's solve leakage, generally it's one of my little kind of wait for it, because within about 10 minutes, someone will say robots in pipes. Do you know what? I actually agree with it. I think it's a great solution. We start to look at how we can put things down the pipes in order to carry out repairs and inspections and things like that. And for me, that's probably one of the ways that we've really got to start looking, but it's complicated. It's not an easy thing to put a robot into a pipe, firstly, and then to be able to get it to go down the pipe and carry out all that stuff. And then you've got to get it out the pipe the other end. So really interesting area. And we're talking with the people on the Pipe Bots program and working out how we can liaise with them. One of the things I do want to understand is palm benefits and effects modeling. Now that's saying, okay, prevent, aware, locate, mend. If I gave you £1 million, how would you share that money between those 4 areas to get the most benefit? Okay, and so what we're planning on doing is doing some modeling at the moment to try and understand, okay, where do we get that benefit from? You know that I've been pushing mend, but we need to understand what's the size of the prize. So we're doing some work on that at the moment. Plastic pipe connection accreditation. You may have noticed in the top left-hand side, when I did the heat map that there was actually a whole bit about plastic pipes in there, and that's a piece of work we're still doing at the moment. I'm working on to say, okay, how do we ensure that we can lay plastic pipes that don't leak? And a bit of that we think would be helped by connection accreditation, hard for me to say, but so that anybody that goes to actually join plastic pipe together, use electrofusion couplings and things like that, has got to have accreditation that they know what they're doing on that bit. Mains replacement justification, that's one of my bugbears at the moment. Our mains replacement rate in the UK is pretty low, very low, about 0.3% per year. We're continually compared with Holland and with other countries, and they say, why can't you have leakage like them? And yet we know that their replacement rate is far, far higher, typically around 2% in Holland. Other countries, Tokyo that we're compared with, obviously the city rather than the country, Tokyo has replaced all of their mains from the 1960s onwards. So we need to look at our mains replacement justification and come up with better discussions, better say, you know, let's not store up a problem for the future, but how can we deal with that right now? And then finally, optical fibers for leak detection, a very interesting piece of work. And I'm seeing a lot of research in that area at the moment and saying, okay, an optical fiber works like a microphone. Now, either you can introduce optical fibers into the mains, and we're seeing some work on that, but also there's an existing fiber network out there, and can we actually use that network as well? So it's a really interesting area of research. I'm looking at that quite a bit at the moment and seeing how we can make best use of that one. So the UK website is now open for suggestions until the 17th of July. So if you do have projects that you're interested in, please put them in on there. But I'd also suggest that you have a good discussion with your innovation manager in your company, because it may be that they want to put something through as well. Depending upon the type of project, it might go into the Innovation Fund instead. A lot of opportunities out there at the moment. There we go. That's it from me. Any questions? I'm going to drop back off now and kind of join back in so I can see the kind of questions coming through.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Truly action-packed. I'm impressed. And also for your upbeat take on everything. I think that's really welcome. So I'll start with a quick question for you, Jeremy. That heat map, I've always thought it's a fantastic piece of work, a really valuable contribution. And you've highlighted a number of areas where there was obviously work lacking. How satisfied are you with the progress that's been made in the areas that you've identified?
Pauses for effect. I am encouraged. Okay, I am encouraged. When I started looking at this, I was kind of aware that, you know, there wasn't a lot of work going on there. I've made that as a prediction, and then, you know, it's kind of, I won't say it was a self-fulfilling prediction, but when we started talking with the companies, it became clear that there wasn't a lot. Considering how little innovation we've had in terms of repair techniques, now we put the call out there. I am getting regular contact from people coming through and saying either they're looking at something there, or in fact, I've got a solution in that area. And it's really good to see that when we're starting to look at the kind of, you know, the soapbox today, we've got a number of people presenting solutions, some of which I've been looking at going, oh, I really like the look of that and things like that. For me, that's a really fruitful area. We're ploughing money into our awareness and location. Okay, great. I completely get that. But it's really great to see some really strong innovations coming through. These are quite quick ones as well. A lot of these are late TRL, technology readiness levels. Okay, so we're seeing quite a lot of things where people are close to getting something to market and just want to tweak it, or, you know, at that late stage. But it's really nice to see some really early stuff coming through. And I know some projects going into the Innovation and Water competition that are kind of, you know, TRL 2 or 3. Really speculative projects, but when you look at what they're actually coming up with, you're thinking, do you know what, if you can do that, that will be fantastic.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question of my own to bring everyone back in, and then I'm going to start taking questions from the chat. So, I mean, it struck me really that collaboration is a theme that's run through all of your presentations. And in the water sector, I think there's often mixed feelings about how collaborative it is, very collaborative in some areas, less so in others. So I'm just wondering whether the need for innovation, and I suppose in the context of this conference, innovation in leakage specifically, is in your opinions driving a step change in the collaboration that's going on. And perhaps if I could just run round each of the speakers with that one briefly, and as I say, then we'll start taking the questions from the chat. So Ben, shall I start with you?
Yeah, so I think like you said, collaboration does happen across the sector really well at different levels. We've got Ofwat here who can talk more about how we might have competition in the sector at the same time. But Well, what I'm finding around this fund is that it's giving us sort of a level playing field to people to reach out to each other, to make sure we're aligned on a common area, so that that's going well. And it brings down some of those barriers. And the other thing from it would be to take some of that step change, is that that's in everyone's best interest, and that everyone really wants to collaborate where everybody can benefit at the same time as part of collaboration. So I feel that's been the strongest part so far we've seen, if I put a competition, innovation and water competition slant on it.
Okay, thank you. And Harry, and perhaps you could wrap in, Harry, kind of addressing the barriers to innovation, because I think that's something that often comes back to the regulator.
Yeah, fairly or unfairly. Yeah, so I mean, I think there are lots of areas that are really underexplored when it comes to collaboration, and that could be kind of purposeful or indirect collaboration. And one area that I would particularly like to make a good point of is the open data element. So, you know, companies have a huge amount of data available to them. A lot of that data needs to be cleaned and processed and kind of sorted out before it can be released. But more opportunities for open data, I think, will create more opportunities for collaboration, not just between companies, but also with third parties, whether that's purposeful or, you know, others are able to create, you know, as with the heat map, more information generates more opportunities for innovation. So I think that is an area, and particularly for things like leakage, but also for lots of other areas, this is something that is really underdeveloped, and I would really like to see the sector and you know, there's opportunities through the innovation competition to do this, to really kind of kick up its game on that front, and make more of an effort to share and be more open from that perspective. On regulatory barriers to innovation, I think there are a lot of different barriers to innovation in this sector, and it is, you know, we've modelled the competition on competitions in other sectors, but this sector is very different for obvious reasons. Some of the barriers are regulatory barriers. You know, and we are keen to learn through the innovation competition how we can overcome some of those, particularly around things like risk, and how we feed you know, knowledge from the innovation competitions into the price review. So we are actively looking at that. I would, however, say that there are still a number of barriers that are driven by the sector and are cultural and historic. And again, we hope the innovation competition is an opportunity for them, companies and others in the sector, to look at those internal barriers again and think about what they can do to start shifting some of that culture internally and across the sector.
Okay, thank you. And Andrea, obviously this must have been a major theme of the strategy that you've been working on.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's a couple of points I'd like to make. One is that the work that Jez has been doing on the leakage heat map, for example, which predates a lot of the work we did on the strategy, has already stimulated lots of really good conversation about how we can collaborate, how we can leverage the work other water companies have done, rather than repeating it. I think for me, the Innovation in Water Challenge is now bringing that into stark kind of light, where all of a sudden we have this brilliant opportunity to accelerate what we're doing through the innovation funding. But looking at the dozens and dozens of ideas that we've got, and the reality that the first round will fund 10 to 15 projects, it just highlights the importance that we all need to be talking to each other about making sure we're working collaboratively on complementary initiatives, rather than all trying to chase our own little individual dream. So yeah, I think we are seeing initiatives such as the Ofwat Innovation Funding really helping to drive those conversations amongst water companies, and then of course that then leads to conversations with the supply chain as well. What I'd say on the supply chain collaboration piece is I think there's some great examples of collaboration. There's some great really deep relationships between suppliers and companies. I still think we've got a way to go there. I still think a lot of the time we point to partnerships, and they're actually quite traditional supplier-client relationships, but we've perhaps developed a more open way of working. We need to make the commercial relationships themselves more open, more flexible to allow for that co-creation, and that's something that I don't know that we're necessarily there yet. It's partly, again, about being really clear about what our needs are and what our wants are, and how we're going to value the contribution from different stakeholders, so that we can really start to move to that co-creation. But I think there are I think we're setting the stage for that, because there are loads of brilliant conversations happening. And it's just making sure that we continue to push ourselves in terms of how those relationships work.
Okay, thank you. And Jeremy, any thoughts on perhaps whether the heat map has helped drive further collaboration?
So I think it's kind of interesting whenever you come to these kind of conferences. I think we come to conferences like this with two expectations in mind. One is therapy, okay, is that we all come along together to kind of do that kind of, hey, do you know what? It's really nice to talk to people that get it, okay, because very often in our workplace, we're the ones that do leakage and it's really important and other people don't. So it's lovely to come to a community that kind of gets it. But the other reason that we come to these kind of things is not just therapy, okay, but also to actually understand opportunity and to see who's working in areas like that. And I think, you know, these conferences have always been great because they bring together that opportunity to understand what's going on. There's now far more opportunity to do that, yeah, because of the Innovation in Water Challenge, because of the heat map, because we have a better understanding of what's going on. So I think we are starting to see, and it, you know, as Andrea said, I think there's still ground to make up on this, but I think as an industry, the leakage industry, I think we're actually getting quite good at collaboration now. It's really starting to come through. Where I'm really interested in it is not just that collaboration between water companies. I think Andrea touched upon something really important there, is this collaboration opportunity with the supply chain. One of the areas I've been following and looking at with great interest is smart networks. What we're seeing in smart networks now is collaboration between supply chain and water companies in a way that I don't think we've seen for a long time. So you look at Yorkshire and what they've done there, they have brought together so many different companies to work together on the smart network. Now, what's really important there is that then becomes a collaborative relationship. It requires that kind of data sharing that we've just been talking about, that ability to be able to take the data from your sensor and pass it to this system. Okay, and I think that's one of the real areas for collaboration within our industry, is to start to move towards standardized systems where we can go, okay, we can plug and play with all of the leakage industry between your supply solution and your supply solution, your logger, okay, we'll talk to that particular system, and they all start to interconnect in a fabulous way, because that's what we're going to need, is that kind of level of collaboration between us as well.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've given collaboration a decent airing. Thank you all. We've got 10 minutes. I'm going to try and get through as many of the questions in the chat as we can. So the first one is for you, Jeremy, from Steve Toombs. He's noting that the heat map shows there is no research going on in very small leaks, and wants to know why you think that work's not happening.
Yeah, so this is what they call background leakage, okay? So leakage that is below the level of detection, typically what we call kind of weeps and seeps, okay? Really, really hard to find, because pretty much the only way you're going to find that stuff is either you've got to enhance all of your detection methods by an order of magnitude, or you're just digging up the road for the sake of, we're just going to see if there's something down there and we've no idea, which from a customer point of view is pretty unacceptable, okay? Where the research, I think, is coming through in that area is more about lining techniques. And it was interesting, you know, you can see the project that we've now got looking at novel methods of assessing those lining techniques. And I think that's where we start to see a lot coming through, Steve, is actually in lining techniques, because that will deal with that background leakage. And that's my hope there. I think, you know, we will see some kind of work in terms of correlation and things like that to get lower levels. But there's only so far you can take that acoustic technology. Be interesting, there's obviously the work that's going on in kind of pressure at the moment, and people looking at micro pressure variation. That has potential to find lower leaks. And then also the fiber optic network. And, you know, as I said, effectively, if we treat a fiber optic as a long microphone, there's potential there that might be able to find those as well. The issue then comes about, are you going to dig up the highway to repair such a very tiny leak? Because there's obviously a cost associated with doing that as well. And one of the ways that it may be, that's why we're tending to look at these kind of methods of non-excavation repair. Put something down the pipe that can carry out that repair, either a liner or maybe even robots and things like that. So I think that will come, Steve. I think it's going to be a little way down the line, though, as the kind of techniques improve.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. So the next question is from Mikhail Wilmot. He's imagining that most people at this conference come from the find side of things, and maybe that's why we haven't focused enough on improving repairs. And the question is, do we need to encourage more engagement with those who have a repair and R&M background? Who would like to? Ben, would you like to have a go at that one, or Andrea?
Well, Andrea gives sort of maybe the water company perspective on that. I think, yeah, looking across the sector, I think it was clear we've seen a revolution in digital technologies, and that's captured the imagination. Smart networks on that side, that's really sort of moved things forward in terms of our understanding of how to operate a network, how to manage the pressure, and therefore reduce leakage, non-revenue water in sort of an effective whole-scale way. Yeah, but clearly, and then the repair side perhaps maybe didn't get the attention it deserved during that period, or we felt that we had a good enough set of options on the table at that time. I'm sure Andrea will talk about how most of this is contracted out through supply chain as well, and perhaps there needs to be a different way of looking at how this work. We all work together to try and make that improvement. But yeah, clearly when you do look at that heat map, it jumps out now that repair is where we're going to find these gains. It's fine. I think we can all point our finger now to where most of the leaks are going to be. Can we repair them quickly enough during this next AMP period to get our target, meet our demands?
Okay, thank you. Andrea, did you want to add anything?
Well, really just to say yes, absolutely, we need to engage with our R&M contractors. They're at the front line of this. Also, of course, many of them are working in other sectors, so there's an opportunity for technology transfer. We're seeing that with things like vacuum excavation, which they don't solve the problem, but they move us along that journey, and we've seen excellent examples of that in other utilities. So absolutely, it's something we need to do in collaboration, and we're very keen to bring in our R&M contractors to that conversation.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not going to ask everyone to answer every question in the interest of time, but if anyone does have a burning desire to say something, please raise your hand or something so I can see. The next question from Alan Cunningham. It's about mains replacement justification. He's saying in the short term, it's difficult to justify that on a solely economic basis, given the benefits are the long-term avoidance of deterioration. So what are your views on how we can make sure the long-term issues are given sufficient investment and focus? And I think that is an issue that comes up time and time again, regardless of the topic of the specific conference. A really good question. And Harry, I'm afraid I'm going to go to you for that one.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, this is definitely on Ofwat's mind, and something that we're seriously considering, how we both use price review and long-term targets in a more long-term way. So how we build and things, it's something that DEFRA has signaled also, that they want to set long-term targets. Again, this is, I think, going to play into the way that we regulate, but watch this space from the point of view of the innovation competition in particular. We are looking to the long term in terms of some of these projects and the benefits that they might deliver. We're not expecting all of them to deliver even within the next 5 years necessarily all of their benefits. So we're hoping, at least in part, the innovation competition will play a positive role in influencing and supporting that longer term vision and longer term investment.
Okay.
Can I just,
Jeremy?
yeah, I'm just gonna, so what I'm doing is I'm just gonna put a link in here, which is the there we go. So that's the National Audit Office, and they actually looked at water supply and demand management, and they were looking at mains replacement, and it's one of the areas that they picked up and said, yeah, this really does need some investigation into there as well. I've been kind of looking worldwide at correlating mains replacement rates and leakage rates and things like that, and seeing how that's coming out. There's some really interesting research out there. The basically the equivalent of the ICE in America looked at the American Waterworks Association and said, okay, let's have a look at your replacement rates, and came down in their report very scathing with American waterworks companies by saying, look, you're not really investing in your networks. And the average age of pipes over there for replacement was 176 years, and they said this is unacceptable. In the UK, we're looking at 300 at the moment. That's our replacement rate. Is 0.3% says you've got a 300-year life upon your mains. It is something we've urgently got to address. I think part of this is gathering evidence as well and getting understanding. As we drive our leakage down, okay, as we get lower and lower, the find and fix aspect of that, the awareness and location and mend side of that, yeah, will become increasingly more costly to do, because you're going to be going for smaller and smaller leaks. And so therefore, as a result of that, we will start to see the cost of replacement, or at least the cost benefit of replacement, become more and more positive. So that's one of the areas we've got to look at. I think the other side as well, and this is my kind of, out to the supply chain, Really interesting seeing that comment about, most people here are from a find bit. I think we're actually starting to broaden this conference out now and say, no, it needs other areas in here as well. I'd really like to see mains laying really engage with and said, look, imagine if we could halve the cost of putting pipe in the ground. I'm not saying we can. I haven't seen a technology that could do that, but what if we could? Yeah, those are the kind of solutions that we need to be looking at, is going, look, let's get a sea change in terms of our mains replacement side and say, how can we make it a lot cheaper? Now, and I'll say this to Harry now, that comes with an engagement with our regulator as well. There's certain areas where we look at abroad and they're saying, yeah, we've got this fantastic system, but for various reasons, it's a real struggle to bring into the UK because of some of our regulatory things and things like that. And that's a discussion we need to have with our regulator in order to make best use of those kind of innovations coming through from abroad.
Okay, thank you. We're pretty much out of time. I'm very quickly going to ask Harry to answer one last question from Pauline Walsh, given that she's the keynote speaker at this event and the PIC leakage lead. So Pauline's asking, is Ofwat planning to close the loop on projects approved to check if they deliver expected benefits? That's obviously regarding the Innovation Fund.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, we are. So this is going to be a big element of all of the projects that we fund and the innovation competition as a whole. We're going to make sure we're doing a lot of evaluation on the benefits, impacts as well. The idea here is to make sure that every competition we fund will benefit all customers in England and Wales, and potentially benefit all water companies and all of the sector beyond water companies too, is through sharing that learning of the impacts of what works, what doesn't work, where new ideas are being tried, that all of that information, the monitoring, the evaluation of that is shared and open. So all of this, our aim is that all of this is going to be open, so available to everybody, and that we're going to keep track of this definitely over the next 5 years and beyond that as well. So yes, this is a big part of the project.
Okay, thank you so much to all our speakers, to Ben and Harry, Andrea and Jeremy.